Okay, Andrew, thank you very much for agreeing to talk to me. Safe to say you're a successful punter, author, journalist and racehorse owner. So how did you first get into this game of ours?
I think I must have inherited it from both grandfathers, and it skipped a generation. One of them was a bookies runner, and I remember watching the ITV racing, sat on the armchair and pretending I was a jockey back in the day. But went to university, met some friends who were into racing, went racing for the first time at Leicester, and it just went from there really. And that was almost 30 years ago now, longer than I care to remember.
So when did you make the transition from, I assume, mug punter to being one that actually wins?
It took several years, and I remember buying Nick Morden's book, Betting for a Living, and on a Saturday with the money that I'd normally use for punting, and just read that cover to cover twice, and that got me into things like speed figures and draw bias and form study, and breaking horses' form down and trying to work out what their ideal conditions were, and that's what I sort of specialise in really.
Okay, so when we first met, you were working for a well-known Leicestershire bookmaker. When did you start working on course?
Well, I used to have a normal job and was gainfully employed in the footwear industry going back a long time now, and I was always trying to get into racing, to make it my job. And I got a lucky break really when the internet first came along, because I used to put race previews on a horse racing discussion forum, the Final Furlong, and somebody from the Racing Post saw them and asked me to contribute to a book he was writing about draw bias. So that was the first thing I ever had published, and from then I started, had an idea for my own book. Don't know if you remember the Trent Horses books I used to do for Raceform, and so then got a book published, and then got made redundant, and that gave me the impetus to do other bits and pieces. And I was doing compiling odds for Paddy Power, doing tissues for jumps racing, handicaps mostly, and then through the connection with Paddy Power, got to meet Martin of Leicester, the Silver Fox, and he offered me a job to work for him on course, so I became his clerk and form man. So my job was to carry the kit, take bollockings, and advise him which horses to go with and which horses to stand.
So how long did you work on course?
It was a couple of years, I think, in total, and then got the chance to work as a spotlight writer for the Racing Post, and I think one too many days standing in the rain at Hereford with Martin of Leicester yelling "money without work" in one ear and Neville Emery in the other ear, and decided if I wanted to not go deaf in the near future, the indoor life was for me.
And do you still go racing now?
Yes, when I'm not on William Hill Radio, I tend to be at the track, so sometimes 3 or 4 times a week.
So you also went into racehorse ownership with the genius of George Nimpton, Nick Williams. How did that come about?
Yeah, I was bookmaking at Worcester many years ago. I think it was 2003, and setting up the kit. And this guy came up to me and he said, "What price is my horse in the first?" I said, "Oh, which is your horse?" And he said, "He's the Biz." I said, "Oh, are you the owner?" He said, "No, I'm the trainer, Nick Williams." I said, "Oh, nice to meet you." And I'd written about one of his horses in one of my books, a horse called Sully's Hope. So I said, "Oh, well, how's Sully's Hope?" He said, "Dead, broke a leg on the gallops." It wasn't a great start to the conversation. I thought he was going to walk off after that, but he stayed and had a chat. And so I said, "Oh, your horse, well, it was around 11-2, there's a non-runner now, and probably going to be a 9-2 shot." And he said, "Not 16-1 then?" I said, "No, where'd you get that from?" He said, "Oh, it's in the race card." I said, "Oh, the tissue in there is not worth the paper it's printed on." So started talking about the race and about one or two of his horses. Forgot all about it. And that day, He's the Biz did the business, and under Polly Gundry, and won that race fairly comfortably, and didn't think anything. I think I had a tenner on at the time, and didn't see the guy again until later that same year, about 4 months later. Comes up to me again, same track, Worcester, same horse, he's the biz. He says, "What price will my horse be today?" And I didn't need any more hints than that, and I think I was straight onto the bookie to have 100 quid on, and he's the biz won at I think it was 8 to 1 that day. So I thought, well, if I ever get the money together to be able to have a horse in training or a share in one, then I'd have it with Nick Williams. And fortunately that came to fruition a few years later with a horse called the Risky Viking. I remember having a 5% share in after going to an open day at the yard, and he was a real old plodder, proper staying chaser. He won the Devon Marathon over 4 miles on soft ground at Exeter, going back to 2007, I think it was. My first share and winner as an owner.
So after the Risky Viking, you struck gold with Reve De Sivola.
That's right, and I had shares in 2 horses in the Paul Duffy Diamond Syndicate colours, Quasar Dudaries and Reve De Sivola. Rev was a relatively cheap purchase, it cost £5,000, had a 15% share, and Nick Williams said, he's a potential star, but we've got to put him in a field for a year. He's got to do some growing. We got him as a juvenile, and he didn't run until the following year. Finished 6th in a maiden hurdle at Chepstow at 16 to 1, beaten about 30 odd lengths. And the genius of George Nimpton, Mr. Nick Williams, then decided to run him in a Grade 2 hurdle at the Open meeting at Cheltenham the following month. And having finished sort of 6th in a maiden hurdle, wasn't expecting a great deal. And before the race in the paddock, he's basically saying we will finish 3rd or 4th. And he says he's improved massively, and we're going to be running a big race today. And I said to Darryl Jacob before he went out, and I said 3rd will be a lot better than 4th, Darryl, for the each way bet. And bet him each way at 66 to 1 and 50s, and I think the SP was 40 to 1. He's managed to finish 3rd. Getting much closer to the de Reve De Sivola, a horse of Paul Nicholls, who beat him at Chepstow. And then from then, he ran 6th in the Triumph Hurdle later that same year, had his novice status retained for his 2nd season, and we went all out for the Neptune Hurdle at the Cheltenham Festival, which was on my 40th birthday. I think you'll remember this well, Simon, because you helped me celebrate afterwards. And Rev had never lost a race when he'd been in front, sort of in the closing stages, and he took it up between the last 2 in that, the 2010 Neptune. Traded at 1.13 in running, and then Pedaller's Cross rallied to get back up, and we were 2nd. So disappointed for a fraction of a second, and then we decided to go out and celebrate as though we'd won anyway. And several hours later, I think we were still celebrating. So that was one of the great days. We had some fantastic times with him. Went to Punchestown several times, Auteuil in France, where he won a massive race with a £250,000 pot. And sadly, he died on the racecourse at Kelso earlier this year. But he gave us some fantastic memories, and he was a wonderful horse.
Well, you mentioned the Scoop Sixes earlier, and I was lucky enough to be part of the syndicates when they won. Can you go back over those Scoop 6 years and tell us how that started?
Yeah, I think there was a big carry forward back in 2006, and decided to have a small go at it, and got the place fund up, and that gave me a sort of few quid in the account to have a proper go the following week, and decided to put a syndicate together. And you were responsible for selling shares to various people you were working with on course at the time, like bookmakers, workmen, and people who worked for the likes of SIS and Turf TV. And I think I staked 1,500 quid. I wanted about 300 quid for myself, but you didn't sell as many shares as I'd hoped for, and I ended up with about £800 worth, so just over 50%. And to cut a long story short, after Teofilo won, I think it was the Dewhurst, we were one of many winners of the Scoop 6. There were 50 odd people who'd won it that day, and I think it was £15,000. Plus the firm we were doing the bet with paid a 20,000 bonus, so we got 18 grand and went for the bonus fund the following week, and that was the St Simon Stakes at Newbury, when we were one of only 5 people who went for the 15 to 2 winner short skirt, and copped another 100,000 quid or thereabouts. So that was the first time we won it, and we went on to win it twice more, including, I think there's a record pot of like £4.5 million in the win fund, and we were one of 8 people to win it. Although some people thought there were 9 winners.
Yeah, tell us what happened there then.
Yeah, I was at the time I was punting professionally in running, living in Canary Wharf and going to a horse racing trading room every day. And after that Scoop 6 win, got a phone call from Harry Finley's form man, and basically said, Andrew, have you won the Scoop? I said, yes, I have. He said, right, we've got a couple of tickets or whatever, and I'm trying to get all the winners together so we can conclude next week for the bonus fund, which was over £1.5 million. He said, is Peter Norton part of your syndicate? I said, no, I don't know the guy. And he said, because apparently he's won it as well, but that makes 9 winners. So we're trying to work out how there's how there's only 8 people confirmed. So that was a bit of a strange one. And it turned out that Peter was £50 into the bet via a friend of mine, and caused a bit of a confusion at the time.
So you colluded with Harry Finley, and what happened on the bonus?
Yeah, well, this was the it was the Hennessy, Newbury, of course, and there were 15 runners in it. We had 8 tickets between us, and I remember turning up the track thinking, "Oh, this is going to be fantastic! Though all these Scoop 6 winners will be sat around a conference table, arguing over which horses to include, which ones to leave out, and it's going to be a fascinating sort of meeting of minds." And it turned out the idea was just to put the first 8 in the betting in and back the other 7 and guarantee some money. So reluctantly we left out the winner, Madison de Burley, which is one of 2 I'd tipped up in Raceform update earlier that week. But managed to get a few quid anyway.
So the heady days of betting professionally solely for your income, I think, are sort of gone now. What is it you actually do now, and why was it so difficult to make a living, as a punter originally?
Yeah, now I'm more journalist and broadcaster than full-time punter. Write a column weekly for Racing and Football Outlook called Between the Lines, concentrating on draw bias and track bias. I do spotlights for the Racing Post. Been doing that on and off now for over 10 years. So that's giving a comment for each individual horse and doing the betting forecast, and then the tips at the end. So that's the kind of thing you see on the walls in your local betting shop. I also work for William Hill Racing Radio, usually up there a couple of times a week, giving preview as an analysis on all the British and Irish racing. So I love doing that. That's a great part of the job. And of course, for many years now as well, I've been writing daily columns for gg.co.uk, Track Bias Diary and Trend Horses columns. So I'm kind of gainfully employed again now. Going back to those sort of 2008, 2009 times down in London, I think my break-even amount I needed each month to pay mortgages, horse race training fees and all expenses was about 8,000 quid. So you do put yourself under massive pressure when you've got to win that just to break even. So it can take its toll on your well-being, and basically it's a massive mindfuck.